Episode 2 start with when Ipang fell, the ghost that was entering him also temporarily left, but Ipang was humiliated in the middle of the court. At this point, he just felt that he really didn't want to continue being a weird lawyer that could be seen. Then his brother-in-law thought that Ipang was crazy, so he called an ambulance, intending to take him to the hospital. But in the car, Ipang secretly told his brother-in-law that he was completely fine, but he was too embarrassed, so he told his brother-in-law to call an ambulance to relieve the siege. After getting off the car, Ipang hurriedly ran back to the lawyer's office because he wanted to help talk to the ghost. In the office, he plans to burn all the talismans inside. According to the priest, as long as the charm is burned, the ghost will immediately disappear. But just as the charm was burning, 𝗵𝗏𝗃's ghost suddenly discovered that his daughter was suddenly unwell, and her whole body was in pain. In order to protect his most precious daughter, 𝗵𝗏𝗃, in a critical moment, immediately entered Ipang's body, holding the priest tightly and asking him to stop immediately. He then extinguished the fire on the talisman, announced that he had to go to see his daughter, and told the priest not to get involved in the matter. On the way, 𝗵𝗏𝗃 suddenly plunged into the river, left Ipang's body, and begged him to help him. At first, Ipang insisted on disagreeing, but 𝗵𝗏𝗃 even demonized himself in front of him, telling the truth that his daughter was sick. Seeing this, Ipang softened his heart and agreed to help. He then hurriedly followed 𝗵𝗏𝗃 to the house, carrying his sick daughter outside. At that moment, Nyeon arrived, and in a hurry, Ipang picked her up in Nyeon's car and took her to the hospital. Seeing the scene of the little girl being taken to the emergency room, Nyeon suddenly remembered what happened in the past. It seemed that she had also experienced the same pain. After the emergency, 𝗵𝗏𝗃's daughter was temporarily out of danger. Ipang asked 𝗵𝗏𝗃 who had just run over to find out about the situation. Hopefully, she can tell him the whole story of her husband's past, because in order to deal with the attack of the opposing lawyer in the future, he needs to know everything. 𝗵𝗏𝗃's wife slowly recounted that 20 years ago, she used to represent the church at the prison to organize Christmas activities. So she knew 𝗵𝗏𝗃. She later learned that 𝗵𝗏𝗃, although he had gone astray, had washed his hands and was determined to rebuild his life. Knowing this, Ipang began to plan his next step. That night, 𝗵𝗏𝗃 reminded Ipang of the nurse who had been fired. If they want to expose the rogue doctor in court, they need the nurse's testimony. Fortunately, the detective found her. Ipang found out that the nurse was a single mother. Because she had to raise her child, she could not refuse the gag money given by the doctor. Ipang came to see her and mentioned 𝗵𝗏𝗃's daughter. After her father's death, she fell ill because she was so grieved that she could now tell the truth and save her. At Ipang's sincerity, the nurse began to act and reveal a clue. The surgical record that the doctor's name submitted to the court had been redacted. She advised Ipang to find the original electronic copy of the surgical record because the original was saved in the hospital's computer. Just finding the hard drive of that computer can debunk the doctor's lie. After investigating, Ipang found that the hospital had replaced the computer with a new one and the old one had been sold. Ipang planned to check cameras around the hospital for clues and asked 𝗵𝗏𝗃 to follow alongside the prosecutor to gather information. After watching for a while, 𝗵𝗏𝗃 discovered the clue before Ipang. It turned out that today, the prosecution received information that the computer had been sold in an old electrical company and that the person behind this was the director of the law firm that replaced the silver speaker. The director contacted the owner of the electronics company to ask for the destruction of the hard drive, but the other owner did not intend to obey but wanted to keep it as a tool to intimidate the director. That night, Ipang dragged his brother-in-law with him to the electrical company, and when he arrived, he took a long hook from his family's pork truck and told his brother-in-law to stand guard while he went to the warehouse to find things. When Ipang crisps open the door, 𝗵𝗏𝗃 reminds him that he used to write the owner of this place. He used to be a gangster, and anyone who displeases him will be beaten very cruelly. I heard that the sale of old electrical appliances was just a cover, and in fact, he was trading in flour. Sure enough, when Ipang opened the warehouse door, the alarms suddenly sounded everywhere. It was obvious that this was an illegal flour trading base. Seeing the Worms Jr. coming out, Ipang and his brother-in-law immediately hid in the warehouse, blocking the door with a pile of old furniture. The gangsters began to climb in from the window, and the two hurriedly searched for the other computer. Fortunately, the brother-in-law spotted it first. Lee Kanpeng also found a dog hole, so the two of them went out that way and escaped the chase. But as she was about to leave, Irang saw Nayeon. To win, Nayeon had previously deliberately stomped on her phone to borrow the prosecutor's phone, thereby knowing the clues that the control side held. This time to get the computer, Nayeon pretended to be a prosecutor, relying on the information she had, to reveal the identity and past of the owner of the electronics company. Then he used the law to intimidate him and asked him to enter the inspection warehouse, overwhelmed by Nayeon's professionalism. The owner let him in. At this time, Lee Kanpeng recognized the owner's car and knew that there was a secret compartment in the seat. Sure enough, when opened, the hard drive was hidden inside, but in the warehouse, Nayeon was in danger. When checking, she accidentally discovered that the drugs were hidden, exposing their crimes. The owner immediately ordered the arrest of Nayeon, just in time for Irang to drive in. But neither Irang nor his brother-in-law were opponents of the gangsters. They played the familiar music every time they made a move and prepared to deal with each of them. Unexpectedly, that familiar melody stimulated Lee Kanpeng's memory. At the next moment, he entered Irang's body again, and in his eyes he turned into the majestic gangster state of the past. In just a few moves, he knocked down all the limbs in front of him. After kicking the name of the race, Irang's strength was also depleted and he fainted in the warehouse. Han Na Hyeon saw the stiffness in Irang's pocket, holding the ball stick and trying to smash it. But looking at Irang and remembering how he had just defended himself during the fight, Nayeon suddenly couldn't take action. Thanks to Irang's efforts and Nayeon's abandonment of destroying the evidence, the authorities finally used authentic evidence to arrest the doctor who caused the medical error. That night, Nayeon opened her notebook, which documented her journey to becoming a lawyer and her winning lawsuits. This time alone, Nayeon wrote 2 words of losing the lawsuit. Although this was the first failure in her life, she didn't seem to feel unwilling at all. That night, Irang went to Lee Kanpeng's house and found his daughter still curled up in a blanket, not wanting to see anyone. Lee Kanpeng entered Irang's body again to say the last words to his daughter, wanting her to understand that his death was not her fault. It turned out that the little girl had previously complained that her father's snoring was too loud, making it difficult for her to sleep. Lee Kanpeng was an extremely pampered girl, so he took that statement as true and went to see a doctor. Unexpectedly, the surgery later cost him his life. She always blamed herself for that. Lee Kanpeng shed tears to comfort his daughter, hoping that she could continue to live well with her mother on her behalf. When she heard the lawyer in front of her call her by her nickname, she finally sat up and told her mother that she had just heard her father's voice. That night, Lee Kanpeng reminded Irang of the nurse who had been fired. If they want to expose the rogue doctor in court, they need the nurse's testimony. Fortunately, the detective found her. Minju hugged her daughter and said that her father was always with them. After the case was over and the knot in his heart was removed, Lee Kanpeng was finally no longer entangled. That night, when Irang lit the charm, Lee Kanpeng took his blessing for his wife and children and left this world. After solving Lee Kanpeng's case, Irang performs a comprehensive exorcism ritual for the law office, vowing never to be harassed by ghostly clients again. But at night, when a newspaper on the window fell to reveal the talisman behind her, Irang saw a female demon floating with her legs hanging in the middle. Today's episode is over. See you later in Phantom Lawyer episode 3. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Remember to like, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Bye.